step away from my mate." The command rolled across the execution hill like thunder over the Colorado plains, deep enough to silence every wolf in Redvale pack before the silver blade could fall. Claire Whitmore stood bound to the moonstone post, her wrists wrapped in cold ceremonial cords, her white dress torn at the hem from where they had dragged her through the snow. Smoke from the judgment torches stung her eyes, but she refused to lower her head. Not now. Not in her final hour. Around her, nearly 300 pack members crowded the frozen clearing, their faces washed pale beneath the blood moon, their voices moments ago chanting traitor as if saying it enough times could make it true. Claire could still feel the place where Alpha Grant Mercer's accusation had landed inside her chest, heavier than chains. Betrayer. Spy. Curse-bearer. Words thrown by powerful mouths, swallowed by frightened people, pinned to the weakest girl because she had no rank strong enough to tear them off. She was only an Omega, and in Redvale, that meant her truth was worth less than a rumor. The wind slid through the pine trees, sharp and dry, carrying the scent of wax, horses, and fear. Claire's wolf, the quiet little shadow that had barely stirred in 22 years, curled deep inside her as if even it had learned not to hope. 10 feet away, Vanessa Hale stood wrapped in a white fur cloak, her golden hair braided like a future Luna's, her expression soft with false pity. "No one claims a dying Omega," she had whispered only minutes before, close enough for Claire to smell the peppermint on her breath. Claire had believed her. Why wouldn't she? No mate had ever wanted her. No family had stepped forward. No elder had asked why the so-called evidence against her appeared only after she had seen Alpha Grant speaking with a stranger beyond the eastern gate. So when the ceremonial guard raised the blade and the pack held its breath, Claire looked up at the moon and made one last promise to herself. "Let me leave this world with the truth still mine." Then the voice came. Not loud. Not frantic. Certain. Absolute. The blade froze in midair. Every torch flame bent toward the forest road. As if the night itself had turned to listen. A man stepped from the darkness between the pines, tall beneath a black traveling cloak dusted with snow, his face hidden by shadow, his presence striking the clearing with the quiet force of a storm no one had prepared for. Behind him, armored riders emerged one by one, their royal insignias catching the moonlight. The red wolf of Redvale vanished beneath a greater symbol, the black crown of the northern throne. Gasps broke through the crowd. Knees hit the snow. Even Alpha Grant went still. Claire could not move, but she felt it then, impossible and bright, a warmth waking beneath her ribs. The stranger lifted his gaze to her, and his eyes were silver, steady, and furious with a kind of control that frightened every guilty heart around her. King Rowan Blackthorn had arrived before dawn. And he was looking at Claire as if the whole world had been wrong about her. For one breath, Redvale belonged to silence. Claire stood beneath the blood moon, staring at the man every wolf in the Northern Territories had learned to fear before they learned to run. King Rowan Blackthorn did not rush toward her. He did not need to. Power moved ahead of him, cold and clean as winter air, pressing the crowd back without a raised hand. The royal riders formed a calm line behind him, their horses stamping softly in the snow, their black cloaks marked with the silver crown. Claire had heard stories about him in the kitchen while scrubbing pans until her fingers ached. They said he was carved from ice. They said no lie survived in his presence. They said he had refused every noble daughter offered to him because the moon had not chosen a queen. Now his silver eyes rested on her face, and for the first time that night, Claire felt seen instead of judged. Alpha Grant recovered first, though his voice came out thinner than before. "Your Majesty, this is a private pack matter." The Omega was lawfully condemned. Rowan's gaze did not leave Claire. Was she heard? The question slipped through the clearing, quiet enough to be gentle, sharp enough to cut through every excuse. Grant's jaw tightened. Vanessa lowered her eyes. The elders looked at the snow. Claire felt the answer before anyone spoke. No. She had not been heard. Not when she begged them to check the eastern gate. Not when she told them about the stranger in the gray coat. Not when she said the ring found under her mattress had never belonged to her. They had not wanted truth. They had wanted someone small enough to carry their fear. Rowan took one step closer, and the ceremonial guard stepped away from Claire as if remembering all at once that duty and cruelty were not the same thing. The cords around her wrists were not meant to wound, but they were tight enough to leave her skin numb. She tried to stand straighter, because an Omega could be afraid and still keep her dignity. Her shoulder ached from shielding little Noah on the road up the hill, and the hem of her dress clung damply to her ankles. Still, she lifted her chin. Rowan noticed. Something changed in his expression, not softness exactly, but recognition, like a man finding a light burning in a house everyone had sworn was empty. "Claire Whitmore," he said, and her name in his voice sounded unfamiliar, almost worthy. A ripple moved through the pack. Some had forgotten she had a last name. Others had never cared to use it. Claire swallowed against the ache in her throat. "Yes, Your Majesty." Her voice was rough, but it did not break. Rowan looked at the gathered wolves. "Who accused her?" Grant stepped forward. "I did. With evidence." "Evidence can be placed," Rowan said. "Fear can be dressed as law. A crowd can be taught to chant before it is taught to think." Vanessa's face paled beneath the torchlight, but Claire barely saw her. Deep inside, the silent part of Claire's wolf stirred again, lifting its head for the first time in years. It was faint, fragile, and trembling, but it was alive. Rowan reached the base of the moonstone post. He did not touch her yet. He looked at her as if asking permission in a world that had taken permission from her too many times. Claire gave the smallest nod. Only then did the king raise his hand toward the cords that held her, while the entire pack watched the girl they had condemned become the one person their king refused to look away from. The cords loosened beneath Rowan's hand without ceremony, slipping away from Claire's wrists as if they had never had the right to hold her. She expected pain when her arms fell free, but what came first was warmth, a strange and quiet current moving from his fingertips into the cold places beneath her skin. She drew a careful breath. Pine. Snow. A trace of smoke from the torches. And under it all, something wild and steady that made her silent wolf press closer to the surface. Rowan stepped back at once, giving her room to stand on her own. That mattered more than he could have known. No one in Redvale had given Claire room for anything. Not grief when her mother died. Not anger when her father's name was removed from the pack records. Not a voice when she was assigned to the kitchens at 14 and told service was the only future an empty-scented Omega deserved. She had learned to move through life quietly, carrying trays through crowded halls, patching torn coats, warming soup for warriors who never thanked her. She knew which floorboards creaked outside the storage room. She knew how to fold herself into corners when stronger wolves argued. She knew how to make herself useful enough to be tolerated, but never visible enough to be defended. That was why she had been awake the night before the Luna selection feast, sorting linens in the east wing long after midnight, when she heard voices beyond the service door near the old gate. Alpha Grant's voice had been unmistakable, low and tense, stripped of the polished confidence he wore in public. Before sunrise, he had said, "The Royal Patrol must never see the ledgers." Claire had frozen with a stack of white towels pressed to her chest. A second man answered him, a stranger with a smooth accent she did not recognize. "Then give us someone to blame." The words had chilled her more than the winter air leaking beneath the door. Through a crack in the wood, Claire saw Grant pass a small silver ring into the stranger's palm, its surface marked with the black thorn symbol used by Shadowfang couriers. She had known enough to understand danger, and too little to protect herself from it. She turned to run for Elder Mason. But Vanessa was waiting at the hallway bend as if she had been placed there by fate or by guilt. Her smile had been perfect. Her eyes had not. "Lost, Claire?" she asked softly. By morning, the same ring was found beneath Claire's mattress. By noon, Grant stood before the pack and called her a traitor. By dusk, every person who had eaten from her hands, worn clothes she had mended, or accepted comfort from her quiet presence looked at her as though they had never known her at all. Now, on the hill, with the king standing between her and the judgment crowd, Claire felt the memory settle into something steadier than shame. Rowan turned toward Grant. "The eastern gate," he said. Grant blinked once. "Your Majesty." "You heard me." Rowan's voice remained calm, but the horses behind him shifted as if the air had tightened. "Open the old gatehouse. Bring the ledgers. Bring every guard assigned there after midnight." The pack stirred in alarm. Vanessa took half a step back. Claire saw it, and so did Rowan. His silver gaze moved to the woman in the white fur cloak. "And bring her too." For the first time that night, Vanessa looked at Claire not with pity, but fear. The royal guards moved at once, not with panic, but with the kind of discipline that made Redvale's warriors look suddenly young and uncertain. Two riders turned toward the old gatehouse at the eastern edge of the clearing, their horses cutting quiet tracks through the snow. Another approached Vanessa, stopping close enough that she could no longer pretend she was only a witness. Claire watched the woman's fingers tighten in the white fur of her cloak. For years, Vanessa Hale had been untouchable, polished by rank and praise for beauty, the daughter every mother admired and every elder mentioned when speaking of Redvale's future. Claire had mended the hem of that cloak 3 days ago while Vanessa stood above her discussing which song should be played when Alpha Grant chose his Luna. Now that same cloak looked too bright beneath the moon, like a costume the night had begun to reject. "This is unnecessary," Grant said, forcing a laugh that found no echo. "The Omega is frightened. She will say anything to save herself." Rowan finally looked at him fully, and the clearing seemed to shrink around that gaze. "She said very little," the king replied. "That is what interests me." Claire felt those words settle over her like a coat placed gently on trembling shoulders. She had spent most of her life being told she was too quiet, too timid, too empty to matter. Yet Rowan had heard meaning in her silence. He had seen the difference between a liar searching for escape and a girl who had stopped expecting anyone to believe her. A small sound broke through the crowd near the lower path. A child's voice. "Miss Claire saved me." Every head turned. Noah stood beside his father, a young guard with his helmet tucked under one arm and worry written across his face. The boy could not have been more than 7, bundled in a brown winter coat, his cheeks red from cold and tears. His father tried to pull him back, but Noah slipped free and stepped forward with the brave stubbornness only children seemed able to carry. "The horse got scared," he said, looking at the king because children still believed powerful people should protect the truth. Everybody moved away. She did not. Claire's throat tightened. She remembered the flash of hooves in the torchlight, Noah stumbling, the crowd surging back while she lunged forward with bound hands and all the strength fear could give her. She had not thought of heroism. She had only seen a child about to be crushed by panic and chosen to become the softer place for him to fall. Rowan's expression did not change, but something in his eyes deepened. "Come here, Noah," he said. The boy obeyed slowly, stopping beside Claire. "Did anyone help her afterward?" Noah looked down. "No, Your Majesty." The answer passed through Redvale like a bell. Claire saw older wolves lower their faces. She saw women clutch their shawls. She saw men who had shouted for judgment suddenly become fascinated by the snow beneath their boots. It was not the accusation that shamed them. It was the simplicity of a child telling what they had refused to see. Rowan removed his black cloak and placed it around Claire's shoulders. The warmth startled her. The scent of him surrounded her, pine and winter air, steady enough to lean against, though she did not. Not yet. She stood on her own, wrapped in the king's cloak while the pack that had condemned her watched in silence. In the distance, the old gatehouse doors groaned open. A royal guard emerged holding a leather ledger high above his head. Behind him came 2 Redvale sentries with their eyes lowered, and between them, pale as frost, walked the stranger in the grey coat. Grant's confidence vanished so quickly Claire almost doubted it had ever been real. Vanessa made a small sound, barely more than a breath. Rowan heard it. Claire heard it too. The truth was walking up the hill, and for the first time in her life, it was not walking away from her. The stranger in the gray coat looked smaller beneath the torches than he had in Claire's memory, not because his body had changed, but because the lie around him had begun to collapse. He was marched to the center of the clearing with a royal guard on either side, his fine gloves damp from the snow, his dark hair falling across eyes that searched for a way out and found only the Alpha King waiting. The leather ledger was placed in Rowan's hand. He opened it without haste. Pages whispered in the cold air. Names. Dates. Supply routes. Redvale patrol schedules. Claire could not read the writing from where she stood, but she saw the moment Grant understood what had been found. His face lost its color. Vanessa wrapped her arms around herself, no longer looking like a future Luna, only a frightened girl who had trusted the wrong shadow. Rowan turned one page, then another. 3 shipments moved through the eastern gate without royal clearance, he said. 2 patrols redirected from the North Ridge. 1 false report sent to my council claiming Redvale had no contact with Shadowfang. The word Shadowfang moved through the pack like a winter draft under a closed door. Mothers pulled children closer. Warriors looked at Grant. Elders looked at one another. The stranger in gray swallowed hard. Your Majesty, I was only a messenger. Rowan closed the ledger. Then deliver one more message. Tell the truth. No one breathed. Claire felt the cloak heavy and warm around her shoulders, felt Noah standing close to her side as if he had decided she was the safest person in the clearing. That small trust nearly broke her more than the condemnation had. She wanted to kneel and tell him he should not stand near someone marked by so much shame, but Rowan's cloak reminded her she was not wearing shame anymore. She was wearing witness. The stranger's gaze flicked to Grant, then Vanessa, then the royal insignia on the guards. Alpha Grant paid me, he said at last, voice thin but clear. He wanted the royal patrol delayed. He said the Omega saw too much, so she would be named as the one who opened the gate. A soft cry rose from somewhere in the crowd. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. The truth did not feel victorious. It felt like finally setting down a weight that had been tied to her chest for so long she had forgotten what air could feel like. Grant stepped forward, fury breaking through his polished mask. He is lying to save himself. Rowan did not raise his voice. And the ring? One of the guards lifted a small silver band sealed in a cloth. Claire recognized the black thorn mark and felt her stomach twist. Found in Miss Whitmore's room, Grant said quickly. Rowan looked to Vanessa. Placed there by whom? Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came. The king waited. His patience was worse than anger. It gave every guilty heart enough space to reveal itself. I was told it would only scare her, Vanessa whispered. Grant said no one would harm her. He said she would be sent away before the feast. Claire stared at her, not with hatred, but with a sadness so deep it made the torchlight blur. Sent away. Condemned. Forgotten. It was frightening how easily people softened cruel choices with gentler words. Rowan handed the ledger back to his guard. Alpha Grant Mercer, you will stand before the royal court. Vanessa Hale, you will answer for false testimony and conspiracy against an innocent member of your pack. Grant's authority broke before the sentence was finished. The warriors who had obeyed him all night stepped away. Claire saw it happen, the power she had feared her whole life turning hollow the moment truth entered the clearing. Rowan faced the pack then, his voice carrying to the last row of wolves beneath the pines. You called for judgment without listening. You accepted evidence without asking who benefited. You looked at an Omega and decided weakness was guilt. His gaze returned to Claire, and the night seemed to soften around her. That ends here. Inside her chest, her wolf rose, still fragile, still unsure, but no longer silent. Claire did not understand what was happening inside her until the clearing began to change around her. The torches that had burned orange all night bent low, their flames thinning into pale silver threads. Snow lifted from the ground in tiny spirals, not blown by wind, but drawn toward the place where she stood wrapped in Rowan's cloak. Every wolf in Redvale felt it. The elders stepped back. The horses stilled. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Claire pressed one hand against her chest, frightened by the warmth growing beneath her ribs. It was not loud or wild. It was gentle, almost careful, like a candle being protected by two cupped hands. Her wolf was awake. Not as a shadow. Not as a weak echo buried beneath years of shame. She could feel it now, lifting its head, silver-eyed and trembling, asking not for permission, but for recognition. Rowan saw the change before anyone else did. His expression sharpened, not with fear, but with awe he did not try to hide. "Who sealed her?" he asked. The question moved through the clearing like a door opening in a locked room. Elder Mason, the oldest wolf in Redvale, went very still. Claire turned toward him slowly. He had been the one who gave her kitchen duty after her mother died. The one who told her some Omegas were born quieter than others. The one who placed a hand on her head at 13 and said her scent would never come, so she must learn humility early. Now his face looked carved from regret. "It was done to protect the pack," he whispered. Rowan's silver eyes cooled. "From what?" The elder looked at Claire, and she saw something she had never seen from him before. Not disgust. Not pity. Fear. From her bloodline. A murmur rose, then faded under Rowan's stare. Claire's knees weakened, but Noah's small hand slipped into hers, steadying her in the only way a child could, without rank, without fear, without asking whether she deserved it. Elder Mason lowered his head. Her mother was not merely a servant from the north. She was Moonborne. The last daughter of the old healing line. Her gift passed to Claire, but Redvale had enemies. We were told if her power woke too soon, it would draw hunters, kings, wars. Claire heard the words, but they seemed to come from far away. Her mother, with her soft brown hair and tired smile. Her mother, who sang to herbs while grinding them in the kitchen. Her mother, who held Claire during winter fevers and told her gentleness was not weakness, no matter what wolves with loud voices claimed. "So you buried it," Rowan said. Elder Mason flinched. "We quieted it." "You stole her voice from her own wolf." The sentence was calm, but it made every adult in Redvale look smaller. Claire stared down at her hand in Noah's. A faint glow rested beneath her skin, silver as moonlight on a frozen lake. All those years she had believed she was empty. Broken. Unwanted by the moon itself. But something had been there the whole time, waiting beneath the weight of other people's fear. Rowan stepped closer, slow enough that she could step away if she wished. "Claire," he said softly, and her name no longer sounded like a question. "The bond one felt when I entered this clearing was not born from pity. It was not born from debt. The moon chose you before anyone here learned how to doubt you." Her breath caught. Around them, Redvale watched the Omega they had condemned begin to shine. Rowan did not touch Claire when the silver light woke beneath her skin. He only stood close enough to let her know she was not facing it alone, and far enough to prove the choice still belonged to her. That distance, small as it was, nearly broke her heart. All her life, people had stepped into her space to command, accuse, inspect, or dismiss. The king simply waited. Claire looked across the clearing at the faces of Redvale, the people who had known her since childhood and still found it easy to believe she was guilty. Some looked ashamed. Some looked frightened. Some looked angry that their certainty had been taken from them. Elder Mason's confession hung over them like a storm cloud. Her wolf had not been weak. Her gift had not been absent. It had been sealed away by fear, then renamed as failure until Claire learned to call herself broken. Vanessa stood between two royal guards, tears bright on her cheeks, but Claire could no longer tell whether they came from guilt or the loss of the future she thought was hers. Alpha Grant watched Rowan with a tight, desperate expression, as if trying to measure how much power he had left. The answer was written in the snow between them. None. Rowan turned toward the gathered pack, his cloak no longer on his shoulders but wrapped around Claire's. Without it, he looked even more like the stories, tall and unshaken beneath the moon, his black coat moving lightly in the wind, the silver crown emblem at his chest catching the pale light. "Redvale will remember this night," he said. His voice was not loud, but it traveled to the last line of trees. Not because an Omega was accused. Not because an Alpha betrayed his oath. You will remember it because every person here was given a chance to choose truth before judgment, and most of you chose comfort instead. No one answered. Even the children were silent. Claire felt Noah's hand leave hers as his father gently drew him back, but the warmth of that small trust remained. Rowan looked at Grant. You used law to hide fear. You used rank to silence someone you thought no one would defend. That is not strength. That is cowardice dressed in ceremony. Grant's mouth opened, but no words came that could survive the clearing. Rowan then faced Claire, and the entire world seemed to narrow to the space between them. "Claire Whitmore," he said, each syllable steady, formal, and strangely tender. "Before this pack, before the royal guard, and beneath the moon that witnessed your final hour, I ask whether you will accept my protection until the truth of your bloodline and the will of your wolf are fully restored." The clearing stirred. It was not the claim they expected. It was not possession. It was not command. It was an invitation, offered to a girl who had been given only orders. Claire's throat tightened. Her wolf pressed forward, afraid and brave at once. She thought of her mother's hands, of cold kitchen floors, of the ring beneath her mattress, of the blade held above her while everyone watched. Then she thought of Rowan stopping it with only his voice. "I accept your protection," she said, her voice soft, but clear enough for every wolf to hear. Rowan lowered his head in acknowledgement, not as a king receiving obedience, but as a man honoring consent. Only then did he extend his hand. Claire placed her fingers in his palm. The bond answered like moonlight breaking through clouds. Silver light ran from her hand to his, gentle and bright, wrapping around them without heat, without fear. A collective gasp rose from Redvale. Rowan's eyes softened, just for her. "Then hear me now," he said, turning back to the pack without letting go of her hand. "She is not your shame. She is not your scapegoat. She is Claire Whitmore, daughter of the Moonborne line, innocent of your charges, and under the protection of the Northern Throne." His grip remained steady, giving strength without taking hers. "And if the moon confirms what my soul already knows, she will not stand beside me because I claim the helpless Omega. She will stand beside me because destiny recognized the strength all of you were too blind to see." The silver light did not fade when Rowan finished speaking. It lingered around Claire's hand in his, soft as breath against glass, turning the snow beneath their feet into a field of tiny stars. Claire watched it with wide eyes, afraid to trust something so beautiful after a lifetime of being taught that anything bright inside her must be a mistake. But her wolf did not retreat. It stood within her, quiet and trembling, no longer hiding behind the walls others had built. Rowan released her hand slowly, not because the bond had weakened, but because he seemed to understand that Claire needed to feel her own strength without anyone holding it for her. The moment his fingers left hers, the light remained. A soft gasp escaped her. Around the clearing, Redvale saw it too. The Omega they had called empty was glowing beneath the blood moon with power no rank could explain away. Elder Mason stepped forward, his shoulders bowed under the weight of years. "Claire," he said, and her name sounded strange in his mouth, almost unfamiliar without dismissal attached to it. "Your mother made me swear." Claire turned to him, the king's cloak warm over her shoulders, her pulse steady despite the ache in her chest. "Swear what?" The elder's eyes shone with regret. "That if the seal ever broke, I would give you what she left behind." He reached into his ceremonial robe and drew out a small wooden pendant, no larger than a silver dollar, carved with a crescent moon and worn smooth by time. Claire knew it before she touched it. Her mother had worn that pendant in every memory that still felt safe. Elder Mason held it out with both hands, as if offering back a piece of a life he had helped bury. Claire took it. The instant the wood touched her palm, warmth rushed through her, not painful, not frightening, but full of familiar tenderness. Her mother's voice seemed to rise from somewhere beyond memory. Gentle hearts are not weak, Claire. They are doors the moon can still enter. Tears blurred the clearing, but she did not look away. She pressed the pendant to her chest, and the silver light beneath her skin steadied into a calm glow. Rowan watched without interrupting. The pack watched without speaking. For once, Claire's grief had room to breathe. Then Noah's father stepped forward, helmet tucked beneath one arm, his face open with shame. "Miss Whitmore," he said, voice rough, "I should have defended you when my son spoke. I was afraid of Alpha Grant." Claire looked at him and saw not an enemy, but a man who had failed and knew it. More voices followed, hesitant at first. A kitchen worker who remembered Claire sharing her winter coat. A young she-wolf Claire had comforted after a broken engagement. An elder who admitted Claire had warned him about the East Gate, and he had dismissed her because of her rank. Each confession landed softly, not enough to erase the night, but enough to begin changing the air. Rowan allowed it, but he did not let apology become escape. "Words will not repair what silence allowed," he said. "Redvale will answer through action. The innocent will be restored. The guilty will face lawful judgment. The weak will not be treated as convenient sacrifices again." Claire felt the pack absorb the command. This was justice, not revenge. It did not ask her to become cruel in order to be strong. It simply refused to let cruelty keep its throne. Vanessa was led past her then, pale and shaking. She stopped only long enough to whisper, "I thought he would choose me." Claire looked at her, seeing the wound beneath the envy, but not excusing the harm it had caused. "That was never yours to take from me," she said. Vanessa lowered her head and walked on. When the eastern sky began to pale, the blood moon softened into silver. Rowan turned to Claire. "You do not have to stay here another hour." Claire looked at the clearing, at the post, at the snow marked by fear and truth and the first light of her awakening. Then she lifted her mother's pendant and let it rest against her heart. "No," she said softly. "I do not." Rowan led Claire down from the Judgment Hill as the first morning light touched the tops of the pines. No one tried to stop them. The pack that had once filled the clearing with accusations now parted in silence, leaving a path through the snow wide enough for a queen, though Claire did not feel like one. She felt tired. She felt cold. She felt the strange ache of someone who had survived the ending everyone else had prepared for her and now had to learn what living meant. Rowan walked beside her, not ahead, not behind. His royal guards waited near the lower road where black horses stood ready, their breath rising in white clouds. Noah waved from his father's arms, and Claire lifted her hand in return. The boy smiled, small and brave, and that smile gave her more comfort than all the apologies whispered behind her. At the edge of the clearing, Claire stopped and looked back. The moonstone post stood alone beneath the fading sky, stripped of its ceremony, just a pale stone in the snow. For years, Redvale had been the only world she knew, a world of kitchen smoke, lowered eyes, and careful silence. She had once believed leaving it would mean she had lost everything. Now she understood that some doors were not homes. Some were cages painted with familiar colors. Rowan waited until she chose to turn away. "Where will I go?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it no longer sounded small. "To Blackthorn Keep," he said. "If you choose it. You will have healers for the broken seal, scholars for your mother's bloodline, and time to decide what you want before anyone decides it for you." Claire looked at him then, searching for the command hidden beneath the kindness, but found none. Only patience. Only the weight of a king who could order armies and still understood that trust could not be ordered at all. "And the bond?" she asked. The question trembled between them, silver and dangerous and full of everything neither of them was ready to name. Rowan's gaze softened. "The bond will wait until you are ready to hear it clearly." Claire pressed her fingers around her mother's pendant. Inside her chest, her wolf settled, not asleep, but listening. The silver glow beneath her skin faded into warmth, steady as a heartbeat. Then the snow around the moonstone post began to shine. Claire turned sharply. Lines of light spread across the ground, tracing an ancient symbol around the place where she had stood in judgment. The royal guards murmured in alarm. Elder Mason fell to his knees. Rowan went very still. "What is it?" Claire whispered. Rowan stared at the glowing mark, and for the first time since he had stepped from the forest, something like fear touched his face. Not fear of her. Fear for her. "Moonborne heir," he said. "A sign that has not appeared in over 100 years." The light pulsed once, and from far beyond the northern ridge, an answering howl rose into the morning, deep, broken, and full of sorrow. Rowan's hand moved instinctively toward the black ring on his own finger, where a faint shadow curled beneath the silver. Claire saw it before he could hide it. The king who had saved her was carrying a darkness of his own. The bond between them stirred, gentle but undeniable, as if the moon had not brought him to Redvale only to rescue her from death. It had brought her to him because his throne, his bloodline, and perhaps his very soul were running out of time. Claire looked from the glowing symbol to Rowan's guarded eyes, and something inside her, newly awakened and no longer afraid of being gentle, answered with quiet certainty. She had been saved at her final hour. Now his had begun.